And we are live.
All right. That looks like it's going. Great.
Are you sending a tweet or something? Yeah, long time no see.
You know, I was going to hold off on that this time because we had a little bit of moderation problems last time. So Misty was helping, but she's not here. So just to I don't know if you played with all the settings in Zoom, but there's like about 1 million checkboxes and password protect or restricted access, require sign in. There's a lot of details to get the, you know, to kind of control the space so that you can do a good job. And I think last time, hopefully it wasn't annoying to you, but I noticed there were people who joined who were unsavory.
The internet. But apparently it's not only the internet. Huh? It looks like even on TV,
can be.
The presidential debate was also kind of was lacking some moderation. Huh?
That was lacking moderation. Yeah, it was funny. It was like this guy, I guess, was from you know, media org, right, from Fox News, and he seemed like he was getting kind of beat up and couldn't really even control the moderation of the thing, right? He's sort of like a professional moderator, and just it was too much chaos to to actually have a productive conversation.
So last week we had a great. It was great, you know, catching up and I thought that, hey, but geez, like I would also love to hear from you, right?
Yeah.
Because it's been a year that we last connected in the Ferry building, and so since then, like, I was like, so much happened, and so I really wanted to know from your perspective, as an, you know, someone in San Francisco, like, how has it been for you, and especially in the last couple of months?
Yeah, well, so I guess I mean, there's so many different lenses to take on that question. So I don't know if you already have in mind a particular lens or perspective, but how has it been for me in San Francisco? You know, I think the last year has been, you know, like probably everywhere in the world, 2020 has just been kind of a mess. So, you know, I'd say like I'm experiencing that mess myself. But I think you know, I don't think that, you know, I don't think I have it bad. I think, like, you know, all things told, I shouldn't complain about anything I'm experiencing is not, you know, I'm not experiencing any of the real stressors in the world, but just being in a world where all these stressors exist is, you know, is painful and stressful and can be frustrating. So I try to, like, you know, sort of withhold some of my, I think for me, it's mostly stress about the possibilities of what could be happening or what may be coming versus the, you know, the actual day-to-day. I think, so we don't have kids, but I think when somebody has children, they're trying to guide through the school system, and the school system has, you know, all kinds of rules, and different schools treat it different ways. I think that is a huge stressor. And, you know, we have a dog, which is very different and very low stress, you know, by comparison. So yeah, I'd say, like, overall, you know, it's stressful, but I think we're fortunate that it, you know, it's, you know, we don't really have anything to, you know, we don't have any really direct experience with the very severe problems, if that makes sense.
And how did it happen, like, in San Francisco, like, because there's been like a lot of different things that happened, right? I mean, from, you know, every now and then, like Trump making like a stride against tech companies, and then there was this COVID-19, obviously, and all of those. Like, how do you basically perceive each of those small steps? And also, like, the article, right, that I sent you, talking about, which I don't know what you think about it, but it basically talks about someone who was in Sri Lanka, right, and experienced civil war basically over there, and explains how it's basically a succession of small steps that every time gets bigger and bigger, but relatively to the previous one, it doesn't rise so much of an eyebrow, and then people just continue their day-to-day life. And so I was really curious to see, like, from your perspective, how has it been?
Right. You know, the frog boiling description. Just kind of,
exactly.
this is kind of, I think, what everybody's in. So at any given moment, it's like, okay, that's bad, but like, what about it? What do I do? But the arc of where it goes in the longer arc of history can be, very, very different, and things that people wouldn't agree to or sign up to. And I think that's just like, kind of a, unfortunate natural tendency of the, so sort of like the near-term perception of what's going on. So, I mean, geez, everything feels like it's, I think if you look objectively, everything feels like it has fallen apart. And so, yeah, like I read the article and it does feel like, I mean, it does feel kind of close to home in a sense, because there's really bad things happening in the world and on the streets even of San Francisco, and certainly in the U.S. at large, in the world even broader. So and yet the day-to-day, it does feel more like it's, you're reading a tweet, you're seeing a news story, you're not experiencing the specific pain so acutely. So I think the story and the kind of the framing actually, is right on. The unsettling or unfortunate thing about the piece, the blog post you sent, is that it doesn't really have a conclusion or suggestion of how to fix it or get out of it, or like what action can you take, or does it have a piece of advice? Because I think even if you experience it and you say, look, I'm the frog and I'm getting boiled, what do you do? Do you jump out of the pot somehow? What does that look like? Because we might not be naive to it. I mean, probably plenty are, but if we're not naive to it, what is the appropriate action?
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you think about that? Do you feel like, is there an obvious action that we're missing, or do you have a proposal for what it should be?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good point. It feels overwhelming, huh? You see all of those things happening in the world, and even though you might be aware of, you say like, what do you do? And we talked about that last week, right? I got involved with Extinction Rebellion, but even so, after a year doing that, I feel like it's still overwhelming. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I was talking about that today with someone at the co-working space, and basically, I feel like maybe one way to think about it is to stop trying to find the solution, but instead focus on the ingredients. I love this book from the coach of the 49ers. The score takes care of itself.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right.
I've not read it, but I've heard passages of it, and I've heard people talk about the topic. Yeah.
So long story short is focus on the environment. Basically, don't focus on the score. Like focus on environment. Have healthy players, a good team spirit, and so on. And the score will take care of itself. And so it feels to me, and when you watch the debate yesterday, and in many ways, I mean, in Belgium right now, like since yesterday, we have a government after 16 months of negotiation. And so you just feel like, wow, like the ingredients are wrong. Like smart people are not taking care of the public space.
Right.
Right. Smart people are all doing various of other things because the public space has become so, well, I mean, do you really want to get into politics? It sounds terrible. It sounds
right. Yeah, I mean, I mean, personally, I don't. There's nothing about it that is attractive to me. I think the process. I mean, I would like, if I could wave a magic wand, I would like the political system to be something like a voluntary, not like an office so much as like voluntary contribution. Almost like, I mean, you talk about like open source movements a lot. If there were something of like, look, we don't know who's going to make the next decision, but it's going to be, we're going to sort of have somebody chosen and they're going to represent for a little bit, and then they're going to be done with it, and it's going to more quickly and fluidly change so that we don't have like, too much power accumulating at any given, point in the system. I think that kind of stuff, which we couldn't do 100 years ago. Like, we didn't have information communication tools that would enable those kinds of things. So I think, in a sense, the system was designed before we had any kind of ability to express information or communication so quickly. Now we have all those, right? Easy, super easy to beam any idea around the world, in under a second. So
absolutely, yeah. So there is a
given that,
mismatch between what we can do and what we're actually doing, because we are still operating with 19th century technology at best, right? Not 16th century technology.
Right.
And there is a mismatch, and that's where
Yeah.
I believe that there is like, wow, a fundamental lack of talent and a lack of involvement of the tech community to upgrade democracy, right? I really like the Code for America initiative from Tim O'Reilly, for example. Right,
Yeah.
their office was just below our office when we were on Mission Street with Storyfy, and yeah, and I think it's great, but I don't know, for some reason it felt like something so much on the margin. I don't know why.
Well, I think you have like the stuff you talked about with the like open data, and I mentioned kind of the sunshine stuff that we linked to in the last one. I think those are ideas that can get some amount of adoption, but I think you need some like not everything really works fully bottoms up. Just poking at it. At some point, you need to kind of say, okay, we're actually going to institute a system or require a system. So I think more transparency. It's hard for me to point out places where transparency won't make systems better, but the transparency has to be kind of more fundamental versus bolted on. And I appreciate the bolt-ons and the attempts that everybody makes. I think those are good. I'm a fan of that. But I think until we create systems where it's not like optional or bolt-on, but it's actually core to the system. So like I've always been fascinated by the open collective idea of like this ledger that shows where all the money comes from and where all the money goes. I think if you could build a government based on that idea, that would be just game changer, just to be able to see everything. And it's all possible. Yep. We have digital transactions for every credit card swipe and you can watch every piece of it where it goes, but the systems we have don't the built in a world assumes we don't have those things. So I would be excited about trying to get deeper, but I think it's tough. I wouldn't consider myself like an anarchist at all, but I think it's hard to adapt the system to do it. I think you kind of need to a little bit start over, and I don't think you need to blow up the existing systems. I think you just need to say like, let them marginalize on their own while other new pockets of new systems get created, versus like the adaptation. I think I'm more skeptical that can be done well.
Well, it's the famous quote of Buckminster Fuller, right? To disrupt a system, you need to build a new one that's going to make the old one obsolete. You don't, and then people transition, right, from one to the other whenever they are ready, right? People can still buy the newspaper today, the New York Times, if they really want to, if they never made it to the internet. Some people still do that. I've heard. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating what you're saying, because I was actually right now, I've been trying to think about how can we apply, this open collective thinking to politics, and also like thinking about this idea of, okay, let's not go straight up to a solution, but more think about the ingredients. Too many talents right now don't want to go into politics and take care of the public sphere, right? And it feels like they should. And so I was thinking like, what would be maybe the equivalent of Y Combinator for politicians? So basically an incubator that wouldn't really so much like take a stand on the idea, on the, really a Democrat or Republican, doesn't really matter, as long as you agree with the principle of the iteration process, of the MVP, minimum viable product. You release, you get feedback, it's open, you iterate, and then eventually you will reach a point of resonance with the market, right? And so here, like what would be the equivalent for politics? Like if you believe in radical transparency, as you just mentioned, and if you also commit to, you believe that you need to seek different perspectives from diverse group of people, then over time, even though you might start with bad policies, over time, you will just have a better decision-making process.
Right. But to do
And
that,
so,
you do need to get players to commit to using that type of system.
yeah, and so you basically,
if you only do it.
Yeah, absolutely. But like Y Combinator, basically, you don't try to convince, existing startup of the
Right.
time when YC started. You just start with a new batch, and then boom, they turn into the Stripe and Airbnb and Dropbox of the world.
Yeah.
That all kind of have in their DNA this shared way of doing things, with this iteration process, run experiments, and all of those things, right? So what would be the equivalent of Y Combinator?
Right. I mean, I think it's an interesting question. I always like the idea of, kind of discussing all of the pieces around the ecosystem of like a Y Combinator for X. So like Erik Torenberg has sort of said Y Combinator for all the things, right? And those things, like he himself has done Y Combinator. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but like he's done little prototypes of Y Combinator for like stand-up comedy, right? He's done Y Combinator for rap battles and like hip hop freestyle kind of rap battles. I've actually attended each sessions of each of those, and they're super fun. And you feel the creative energy, and you know that this is a place where the people who are contributing, there's some really great people and there's some raw people who are just trying it out. But it's a great like petri dish to be able to like express creative ideas and have an onboard to creative ideas that, some of which can graduate out, many of which won't, right? So I think the kind of YC for X is a pretty interesting kind of shape to explore. But I think in government, there is a problem to sort of do YC for government, which is like the output of creative projects are often that the market just decides that this guy is a really great comedian, this woman is a really great, hip hop freestyle rapper. The market can kind of decide if they appreciate that creative work. And also if the market wants to use the products that Stripe chooses to offer, then Stripe wins. So in a sense, the selection criteria of the winners is kind of evaluated by the market. And I think it's hard to draw that connection with YC for government, because it's not like a creative process that has an obvious, market selection endpoint.
But in a way, no, don't you think? Have you seen the documentary "Knocking Down the House" on Netflix? It's about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Because in many ways, kind of, she's been part of such a network that was kind of operating as a Y Combinator for Congress,
right. Is that right? She was part of there's a network that was kind of doing that. So were there like dozens of people who are all kind of collaborating?
And she's the only one who passed.
Right.
But I think like, oh, that's interesting. So the documentary is worth watching. But I think like anyway, like I think like this problem is just so big and so overwhelming that there is no silver bullet, but there is. But we know that there is a few things. Like it's never a bad idea to have better talent. Right? It's like look at the ingredients, and it's a necessary thing. So back to you to San Francisco during the lockdown. Like how did you? Like concretely, like in your kind of everyday, like how did things change for you, like for your business and day-to-day life? Because you were also like in the middle of building like a product, but I remember that we're already before the lockdown into remote work. So how did that impact you, if at all?
Yeah. So I mean, it's, I think it was accidental, but we turned out to be perfectly situated for the world that showed up. So, I certainly wouldn't wish it on us or anybody, but, we've sort of been operating in a COVID-like state as far as the company goes for 2.5 years, like long before COVID. So, to be honest, it wasn't that disruptive to how we do this. And I think the specifics, I mean, every day we're on Zoom, everybody, and we're all over the world, UK, Croatia, Russia, India, Australia, like there's people all over the place, right? Colorado, California, of course. So we have, we collaborate through Zoom and Slack, and that works really well. And we're in like very close touch with each other. I think 2.5 years ago when we started, people said, this is crazy. Why are you doing this? Any ambitious company would not be structured this way. And I think over time, I think, obviously COVID has, I think, accelerated the acceptability of this idea. But it's obvious, once you do it, I even wasn't sure of it when I started. I was like, we'll experiment with it. And my friend even said, he's like, hey, why don't you just try it? Because he had done it a lot, for many, many years. He said, why don't you just try it? If you like it, you can keep doing it. If you don't like it, that's fine. Just go back to your normal ways. Go get an office in Soma and you can have a local team and that's fine. And I think what we found is actually it works really well. And in fact, I would argue better in many ways. There's like a lot of, there's a lot of opportunities to collaborate where people are, able to contribute and focus in a way that I think sometimes that focus doesn't exist in the kind of San Francisco culture. It's like sometimes a little, there's like good and bad to the freewheeling nature of it. And I think sometimes when you're just trying to execute something, San Francisco is not as good for that. So I think, there's pros and cons, but I think the collaboration has not been a problem and it's worked really well. So then when COVID hit, I'm always active on Twitter. So I think I was fortunate to, kind of get some signal of it early and kind of prosecute the ideas early. And so I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but, I ordered, my first step is kind of like, it sounds silly now. I remember I was at an event, an in-person event, and this guy walked up to me to shake my hand and I kind of gave him like an elbow to elbow bump him. And he was like, what's this? I was like, oh, COVID, like, and it was way too early to be, that was like a very awkward interaction. So that was like the one thing I remember is like the first thing, because we were still going to events, even though I was a bit concerned about it. And then I remember going to place an order for just jugs of water to be delivered to the house. I actually have a picture of all these jugs of water I had, because I didn't really know, like, okay, are we gonna not be able to go out? Probably need food, but like at least water. Let's at least make sure we have water. So we've only touched like one of them. We don't really use it. So we played with the jugs of water, and then we did do a bunch of like stockpiling of other food, that can preserve longer. So we have all of this stuff, and we got very cautious about, packages coming and leaving them sit, before opening them. But these are like tactical things. These, that's kind of, we weren't sure, we didn't have enough information, so we just sort of erred on the side of caution. And I think we sort of, let up a little bit over time as we've gotten more information about where the real risks are. But I think we have a pretty healthy balance right now. We don't feel too constrained, but we're certainly, going out and about and don't do a lot of extraneous stuff. But,
Did you stay in quarantine at any point, or?
Well, some of the people that I work with around the world have one definition of quarantine, which is very, very strict. And I would say nothing like that kind of quarantine has happened in the US or in San Francisco with us. So, like quarantine where like if you leave your home, somebody from like, the state, some police or somebody shows up and like asks you what you're doing and checks your, if you claim to have a prescription to go pick up, they want to see the prescription. Like, it's nothing like that in San Francisco. People have always been able to kind of go out and basically carry on with their lives. So it's, I think people generally don't go out as much as they used to. By a huge margin, by 10x, 100x. It's, much less activity on the streets, very easy to drive. We can drive to Soma in 10, 15 minutes, whereas that might have been 45 minutes before. So it's changed a lot from that perspective, but I think it's more just people being cautious versus like a actual lockdown quarantine.
How has your behavior changed in the city?
I'm cautious about touching, like when I go walk the dog and I'm gonna go lift up a garbage can to throw away the poop. I'm cautious to touch that garbage can because you don't know, right? Now, these aren't huge threats these days. I think, the case load, especially in San Francisco, is very, very muted. But I'll still take those kinds of precautions, and there's a lot of, when we go into shops, we wear masks. It's required. I think maybe a city ordinance, if not state. But if you're going to go into a shop to go grocery shopping, or if you're going to go pick up if you order takeout, you're going to go pick it up. Which actually, that's one thing typically we might have ordered something to be delivered, but then it touches more hands, and that's more risk. So we've been ordering something and then going there to pick it up ourselves. So a few things, but it's been, like I said, it's been minor for us overall. We don't, it's frustrating, I think, to be so, like, we used to host dinner parties a lot. We'd have 5 or 10 people over and we'd cook and all kind of hang out, and like, we don't do that anymore. And that used to be like a big part of our lives. Like, we would do, especially my wife is just always like this. So she's done a lot of these. So we haven't done that. And that, there's a emptiness from not seeing people and not seeing people in groups, and the kind of the rapid switching social contexts and seeing lots of people, that, I feel like a certain emptiness from that not being part of life, but that's not part of life these days. Hasn't been kind of all year. So what about you? Do you have similar?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I noticed is that, like, we started living much more in the neighborhood. Like, it's kind of as if the size of the city shrunk.
Yep.
And then also, like, the quietness of the street, like almost no traffic. Hearing birds again in the city. That was quite impressive. And then and then also realizing all of this concept of frontline workers. Then you realize when everything is blocked, the economy is on pause, and then you realize that, wow, actually, to make a society work, you need all of those frontline workers, and actually they've been for a long time, like, totally forgotten in many ways. And that to me was kind of revealing. So what that experience has kind of, what do you get out of it? Like, did that change the way you look at the world? Did that like, are you going to, through the different activities you do, your own business? Like, first, did you, maybe you can present again, like, what you do?
Yeah. I think, it has changed. I think, well, there's a few things that have really changed, like the stress level. And I think that kind of, carries on to sort of, that's sort of a base root in life, right? And I think the stress level, I think the, COVID is one stressor, and I think, it's lower today than it was 3 or 4 months ago, but it's still present. And then I think, the wildfires in California are a bit of a stressor because, first, we don't have clean air. Now, it comes and goes. At the moment, it's fine. But if we knew it were constrained to 1 day per year, like it has been in recent years, okay, that's not good, but that's livable. If it's now like a whole season with months, and which it has been kind of now, it's like, when's it going to end? How long is this going to be a problem? And it makes you wonder, like, do you want to be here? And if the rest of the reasons that we're here are, decoupling, we sort of also have to ask the question, like, if we can't have a dinner party and have 10 people over like we used to because of COVID, and now because of fires and other reasons, people are, moving on and moving to ski towns and, the desert and different places. Like, do we want to be here? Because I've been here 20 years and it's changed quite a bit. But I think we ask that question a lot. I don't think we have like great answers because, everything comes with a compromise and there's trade-offs. But it's certainly top of mind, and I'd say a stress. And then, obviously I think the national kind of political thing, which has global impacts, and it's just you don't look at it and you don't have like confidence that this stuff has a better path ahead. So you kind of wonder, okay, if we're going to have more of that stuff too, nonsense of one form or another, what do you do? Where do you go? It's just like it's like an unsolvable problem. I don't think there's like, okay, here's the set of steps. We're going to execute 1 through 10, and then we're going to finally come out the other end of it, and it will be better. It's kind of just this malaise of like, well, that's bad. Oh, well, that's also really bad, and here comes more bad. So,
have you seen a lot of people in your environment that have left San Francisco or planning to leave San Francisco?
Yeah, many who have left, and many who are planning to leave, and then many who I wouldn't say they've like committed to leaving, but they said, hey, as long as I don't have anything to do here right now, I'm going to go, spend the summer in Colorado, or I'm going to go spend the summer in, LA or something. Or like a lot of people have gone up to Oregon or Seattle or something. So, or Utah actually is surprisingly popular too. There's a lot of people just like going to Utah. So I think there's something about, that disbanding of people that is not, it's not like people say, oh, I'm getting out, I'm leaving. They're saying like, I don't have anything to do here right now. I'll go do that for the next few months.
Is the MVP.
Right. It may be, yeah. It may be the MVP of that. And I think it is. In some cases, there's people who say, look, I like this other thing I'm doing. It works better for me for one reason or another. And I think for some people, it will stick. And we've so far, not really made a commitment to, we've not really experimented with an MVP. We've sort of discussed it, and we're interested to hear what people are saying, and we think about it a lot. But we haven't yet really committed to a path there. But lots of people have been doing those MVPs, and I think coming up with positive kind of feedback or kind of positive experiences. And I think it's also natural. There's a lot of these trends like that are emerging. Like the fact that COVID exists means that we don't get to visit with our networks as much. So then the purpose of place becomes less important. And so I think if you imagine like the purpose of a city really is a place to gather and be with the energy of all the rest of the people there. And if that is broken and most of everything we're doing on Zoom, then the attractiveness of being in a city will decrease. And so I think that's actually, it goes back to some of the other stuff you were asking about, which is like, if you're going to reinvent government, maybe some of the reinvention is instigated or has the opportunity to be instigated around this moment. Because if a city is losing its grip on kind of the networks of humanity gathering and the energy, then maybe now is a good time to reconstitute some of that energy into places a little bit further afield, but maybe with some of your new kind of governance ideas. So I know of at least a couple of friends who, and this wasn't fully onset by COVID, but a few that are sort of doing these commune type living things where they buy a property in like the mountains, and then they build out, there's one structure, they build out new structures, and they kind of have, half a dozen or a dozen people who live together, and they kind of make their own neighborhood in a sense. And that I think can be a very powerful like beginning to a network effect, right? That, you don't always have all of the, you don't have the flexibility to properly like govern, certainly not the federal level, not even at the state level, but you start to try out new methods of governance, right? You have to decide like, are we allowed to build things on this property? If we build things and we co-own this thing, who owns the capital improvement?
Yeah. And I think this is actually a next big wave of technology in many ways, right? It's all about decentralization. And this is basically applying that to the physical space. right?
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
crypto that is kind of applying that at the bits level, and then all of those macro communities are applying those same thinking to the atoms level. And I think it's
Yeah.
fascinating. It's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
the, and then thinking about what is the MVC as in minimum viable community.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like, what do you need to kick something off? Because when I think about if we were to leave San Francisco, which, you know, it's possible, we haven't committed yet, but it's possible. I think one of the major factors that would be important is where would you go, and either would people already be there that you would expect someday after COVID lets up that you could do dinner parties again? Or do you believe that, like, do you believe you should join places today that where there already is a hub of activity, or would you want to start your own hubs of activity? And I think the characteristics of a place that's going to have a new hub of activity is probably pretty different. Like, you know, I don't think I think like San Francisco to LA is kind of shrug. Okay, you could have lived in either place before anyway. There's nothing really new about LA. I think if you say, you know, a place, and I think, you know, like Seattle, Austin, Texas, these all are kind of like mini LAs in that respect. But I think there are, you know, I'd say one trend I would point out is there are a lot of people moving to these like more like second and third tier cities that are, you know, historically not a good place for technology, business, or ambitious people to gather. They're sort of more like maybe vacation or retirement places. So I know lots of people who've gone to Hawaii, and typically go to Hawaii for vacation, but these people are going there to like, well, I don't know, I don't have to be anywhere in particular. Why don't I go there? And they can also work for employers remotely, so they actually can have an ambitious career process, but they can do it from kind of wherever they want. And I think, you know, cities come to mind with that characteristic. Like, I think Santa Barbara is one that, you know, has, you know, some potential for that kind of thing. San Diego has never really had a very strong native to San Diego tech community. I mean, there's a few companies, but it's not really a hub. But if the hubs don't matter, then maybe that kind of place would become, you know, much more, you know, relatively more attractive to people who wanted to relocate. I think, you know, all of the ski mountain towns in Colorado, Tahoe has had a huge I know lots of people who actually used to live in San Francisco who now like live in Tahoe, you know, indefinitely and full time. So I think the vacation spots are the new, you know, maybe the MVCs that will, some of the early MVCs may be these vacation spots. And that, I think, I haven't fully read all this stuff, but I think, is it the stuff that Balaji and Joe Lonsdale, is it the Cicero or Cicero Institute?
I'm not familiar with that.
They're doing this thing, let me see. CiceroInstitute.org or Cicero Institute. I've heard that might be the right pronunciation. I'm not sure. I just sent a link.
Cicero Institute.
But entrepreneurial solutions to public problems. So it's looking at, you know, making new charter cities. Yeah, this is totally your jam. I think you would really enjoy it. Check out the article on why we need more charter cities, because effectively this is Joe Lonsdale wrote this. It's basically all of the stuff you're talking about, like what is an MVC? How do you do that? And I think, you know, these ideas have been around for decades. You know, there used to be like the Seasteading Institute was kind of, I think, you know, some overlapping networks of people. And they were about like, can you start a new colony on a ship living off the coast of San Francisco? Can you set up a new nation state? Or I don't know to what extent it was actually a new nation state, but can you really like make a new government and prototype that and get the right people together there? And so, yeah, I'm not deep on this stuff, but I stumbled across it. It's interesting and relevant to the stuff you're talking about. And I think this is maybe an example of a nice kind of MVC, you know.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it. But I think, I mean, fundamentally, we just need to run more experiments. Like, you know, we don't know. It's like it's like startups ecosystem, right? We don't know one particular startup. It's quantum physics. We cannot know precisely which exactly, you know, atom is going to be where, but like we can know that on average, you know, there is like there will be in that. And so I think it's the same idea here. Like we need to we see it through all the crises we're going through right now, that wow, we need to reinvent something. And there is a lack of imagination, right? We talk about innovation. We don't need more innovation, actually. We need imagination, reimagining a new way of building community, a new way of living together, to go beyond the capitalism as we know it. Not that capitalism is bad, but it needs to be, you know, it got us where we are today, and we need to find something else. And so, but to imagine, we need to try. And we need to try, we need to run experiments. And so we need to reduce the cost of experimenting. And so those charter cities is exactly that. It's all about creating like those those Petri containers, like and then try. So
the tough thing about the charter cities are you need to be able to get a critical mass of like infrastructure and people at least. So in a sense, you know, do you grow a charter city from 12 people who start a commune, or do you actually give it a little bit more bootstrapping structure before you start inviting people in?
And you know, and I could argue, do you bootstrap a startup, or do you start with $10 million VC money? And the question is, it depends, right? And that's the, you know, and I think like it's going to be the same for charter cities. There's going to be a lot of different charter cities, and some starting with, you know, bootstrapped, and others are going to be more like quote quote VC Singapore style plans, and then everything in between. But it looks like actually, when you look at this, like China actually is the only place right now that is actually running those experiments.
Right.
And I like to see that. And maybe when I see with COVID actually, and people in Silicon Valley going to those second tier cities, I actually in many ways hope that that talent is going to now get interested in other topics, in those topics, and start experimenting with, hey, what is the operating system for a city actually? You know, and applying the same design thinking.
And I mean, it's an ambitious idea, and I agree that like there's kind of the bootstrapped and then the big Series A venture funded version. I think they each maybe have a role to play in sort of helping move these ideas forward. There's another one is, do you know Ryan Johnson and Culdesac?
No.
Do you know him? Oh, you would like this. Did I mention it? Maybe I mentioned it before. He's working on this reimagining what would the world look like with cities that are built for humans, not cars. So
yeah.
Certainly,
you sent me something like about that. You sent me a tweet about it. Yeah.
So I think it's and actually Ryan and I did a socially distanced walk over the weekend, so I got to catch up and hear a little more about the latest. But he's in Tempe, Arizona, and they're building, you know, a city, which, you know, within kind of Tempe, but like for people who want to live a carless lifestyle. So
great, brilliant.
It's a petri dish of an MVC, and you need people who are like, you know, want to live there because of the offerings that it provides that are unique and different, and the people you'll meet there are going to be people who are also bought into this mission and this new style of the world. So I'm curious, like, so we talked a bit about these petri dishes and a few of these ideas that I mentioned, you know, the institute and the communes in the mountains. Like, do you feel like this is a topic that is present in Belgium or present across Europe, or like what forms might it take, kind of from stuff you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think like also like culturally, like the European culture has always been like much more about communities, you know, compared to the American culture, which is more about individualism in many ways and personal freedom. And so, yeah, we just spent the summer actually for 2 weeks, like in a kind of an eco village in France. And it's actually a community of 30 people. They all get universal basic income now. They have this massive property. They have their own permaculture garden. And then they do, like, you can go camping during the summer. And it's fascinating. It's super interesting. And I think like, yeah, like with COVID, like we've also seen a lot of people like going back to gardening, going back to, you know, making their own bread, kind of going back
Right.
to first principles,
Yeah.
right? Oh,
Yeah.
actually, now that I have more time, like, you know, I can actually spend the time, make the time to actually do those
Yeah.
things that are very mindful in many ways,
Yeah.
right? It's not the rush of the everyday life and quick get in the car and go, you know, in the
Yeah.
traffic jam and get to work and all of that. And then you barely have time, and so you need to buy everything wrapped in packages, and you have a lot of
Right.
waste. And this society of this consuming society, consumerism, is really reaching. It's a flipping point to me. This crisis for this idea of you know, of the economy of the wants, not of the needs, and this economy of consume, you know, waste, and all of that.
Yeah.
And then like people
You
going
know how
back
I
to
think
first
that stuff
principles
is
and
going to get. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that the people who are programmed for wanting to consume, I think that need can and will be met more in virtual worlds where the cost to consume is free
yep,
or relatively
yep,
free.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I think you get a lot of the same kind of whatever is the psychological benefit you get by going shopping and buying a nice handbag or a new car or something. Things that are not primarily about utility, but they're kind of more like self-expression or just like it's pleasurable to pick from a set of things and then choose the one that is yours and that you want. And then it's there's some sort of psychological safety to owning something. I think a
yeah,
lot of those experiences can be recreated at 90% fidelity in a virtual world if it's something that you live in and believe in and care about, right? And so I think a very rough prototype of a virtual world is like Instagram is itself a virtual world, but it's like a prototype of it's not the Oasis. It's a prototype version. But I think
yeah.
I think one of the best things for getting
But
less
don't you think could
consumption
be a trap
is
too?
I think it
Yeah, I
is.
mean, I see your point, but it's a trap. Have you seen the social dilemma?
Since we talked, I watched part of it. Yeah, so I got the gist. I get what it's about. Yeah,
Yeah. So
I
yeah, it's
I do
it's
think that it's uh, you know I guess I would say I don't think you can fully reprogram every human to be a Zen, meditator out, on the rock with no desires and no needs. I think that's like a nice, it's a nice maybe goal to get to someday, but I think it's not close. I think we're quite a ways from that version of humanity. If it's in fact where we should go, I don't know. I'm not proposing we should, but I think consuming things and needing to like get packages delivered and generate waste and stuff. I think a lot of that stuff can be replaced by the equivalent feeling in a virtual world that has basically zero impact on the environment. And then that's not to say that, I mean, there's problems and trade-offs that come with virtual worlds. I just think it's relatively close. Like, Fortnite is a virtual world, fairly high fidelity virtual world compared to Instagram. And I think it's just going to get, that and other platforms will just get higher and higher fidelity. So it's less, I'm not making like a judgment like, hey, if only we could just all do this. I'm just saying it's a spectrum in steps. And step one is move from demand and desire in the physical world to replacing that with demand and desire in the virtual world. That's maybe step one for some
so
set
just
of people.
for seeing the kids of my partner who spend a lot of time on Fortnite during this lockdown. The thing that I realized is that like, geez, like when I was a kid, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I was playing on the street.
Yeah.
And in many ways, it feels like we've made this world outside so hostile, right? That the only way you can still be outside is in a car, right? And increasingly with a Tesla level filter for air quality, right?
Right.
And so the only place you can still roam free is basically on those screens. And that's a bit of a dystopian future. I'm not sure that this is what I want for my kids. Right.
Yeah.
And so I get the yes, we can maybe replace like what used to pollute with with bits, with electric shocks in your brain. But is that really, I don't know. I feel like in many ways, and talking to myself personally, like I feel like through this crisis, I also kind of started developing a bit more of an allergic reaction to technology, where I feel like, geez, oh, whoa, let's take a step back. Like, is technology really the answer? Like because in Silicon Valley, right, we always have this thinking that there's got to be a technological solution to every problem.
Right.
Right. And
Right.
so I love the movement that's growing a lot of low tech, which is thinking about, hey, can we go back to simple tech that actually make better use of humans? Basically, don't try to replace humans, but just try to, with simple things that can be fixed if they are broken or whatnot. So I don't know. It feels like we talk also more and more in Europe about degrowth, right? About the fact that we mathematically we just cannot continue to grow the GDP because it means more and more energy and all of that, and more waste and all of that. So mathematically we cannot, and so we need to degrow. But that doesn't mean not stop growing, because we keep on growing. Like, we need to grow the happiness level of people, right? The well-being of people need to grow, but the consumption need to degrow. But then the degrow, maybe we should talk about degrowth too in our industry. Like, is it normal that basically, like, our software has been from about, I mean, come on, like in with your watch has more power than the computer used to go to the moon. Right. We kind of never had to worry about using resources whenever, as engineers, we had to develop those software and so on, right? And so how can we make, like, as a community, like a stance, like, hey, you know what, like, actually maybe we should actually divide by 2 the rate of device, how often we need to renew our devices. Maybe actually we should spend time not developing new features, but just making existing features like work twice as fast on the same CPUs. I don't know. I just wonder, like, is this an idea that is percolating in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I mean, I would, I hear the sentiment. I'm not sure that, I think if you just think about, like, why does the system or world work the way it does? Because of the incentives, and some of the incentives are, it's set up this way. So I think if you want to change behavior, I think you have to change incentives.
Yes.
And the incentives are for growth. And I think growth is great in many ways. And I think it's not always good.
It depends how do you define growth. Because if you define growth as the term of well-being, then absolutely. But growth for the sake of growth can actually, at some point, like, look, I'm 5'6", I had to stop at some, every organism stops growing. It's natural. You actually don't want to grow indefinitely. So how do you define growth?
Yeah, I mean, in growth, there's things that grow that are good, and there's things that grow that we would rather not have. We might say bad, like cancer is growth, unbounded, but that's bad. But I don't think just because cancer may be bad growth doesn't mean that all growth should stop. Because I think the problem is, if you don't have growth, then you get into, like, zero sum. Everything is like, it's either mine or yours, and it can't be ours if we can't make it better together. So a world that doesn't grow, I think, is a tough one for, new people who maybe weren't part of the old system to come up into.
But that's only true in the world of scarcity. That's not true in the world of bits.
Correct. Yeah. Which is why I propose, like, the virtual world. I think the virtual world, everybody can be king in the virtual world. Yeah. Right. So
how is that, like, now, like, I want to it's been an hour to maybe wrap up this conversation. I want to know, like, what's next for you? What with all of that and all that we discussed, like, where do you have your mind, and what are you focusing on right now? And are you still investing, or are you still, like, spending a lot of time on that product for the book club? Like, tell me, where's your head?
Yeah. So, I think I would say, 100% of my time and energy really is going to making a highlighter better.
Yeah.
I think the investing stuff for me has always been a bit of, interest and passion and network. And, I think, been fortunate that it also has good returns financially, but, I'm not a professional. I don't go about it as a professional prosecuting, getting all the deals, see everything, pick a few.
Yeah.
It's, in all the best investments are just people that I've known, versus somebody that I met around like a hot deal. So I would say I have like down modulated investing and made it really much more hobby than even it was before, in a sense, right? Like I think it's, and to be honest, I think the purpose of that is like, it's people and information and friendships. It's just like, there's so much good to it, but I think the more that I try to make it work, the more it's a distraction. So for me, it's really just, a sideshow, and probably always will be. But Highlighter has just become more and more interesting. So, I say Highlighter, we sort of set out to realizing that, a book is a sometimes digital tool for information, but is not a networked tool. Like we don't have networked books. We have like networked everything else, but a book itself, think about the thousands of ideas inside a book. They're like, one book contains so many interesting things. And maybe you have a perspective on idea number 267. I have an idea or perspective on idea number 568. How do we connect? How do I know that you care about that idea and I care about this idea? So I think there's just like, and I think, my whole world is just a world of people and ideas. It's like, that's the whole thing. I don't know, for better or worse, that's who I am. That's what I love. I don't, I love riding my bike outside, but, other than, kind of my activities like that, I like people and ideas. So it turned out to be, infinitely fascinating for me to explore this idea in different ways. And I think it's manifests itself in, in different flavors and utilities over the years that we've been building this. But I would say like the one thing that has not changed and still is very core is anything we do, any book we read, or a website, a blog post we read, or a video we watch on YouTube, or even this Zoom chat that we've had. There's thousands of ideas that could be explored, and there's a bunch of links that we could share. There's so much going on here, and those ideas are not. It's not easy to gather around and discuss and meet the other people interested in those pieces of media and those ideas. I sort of described the Highlighter journey as trying different ways of organizing people and different types of media that we organize in order to create these hubs of discussion where people and ideas can connect.
Yeah, because a book is basically a social object.
Yeah.
Right. That brings a community together, and it's true that when you have sometimes book like the sovereign individual, for example, that in the crypto community has become this book, or reinventing organizations. Here we go, one of those.
There it is.
There we go. Or reinventing organization, right? All of those books also have concrete ideas and examples about things to explore. And it's actually it reminds me there is this collective, an open collective, that is basically managing a wiki around the book Reinventing Organization, where they collect different experiences from people who've been basically applying those ways of thinking and stuff.
Oh, cool.
And so yeah,
I'd love to check that out. You'll have to send me the link.
Yeah, I sent the link. But that, like, I was reading recently, like the book of Rob Hopkins. I don't know if he's known in the US. Is the founder of the Rob Hopkins is the founder of the Transition Network, which is all of those town in transition that are basically citizen initiatives, local currencies, all of those different movements. Okay. It's actually quite big in Europe and very interesting. And he's made this book. It's called What If. And it's basically arguing that the biggest problem here in our society is basically a lack of imagination, that we are unable to think beyond the GDP, right? And it's actually quite interesting. But indeed, like, wow, actually, I would love to be able to tap into a community of people who have read that book,
right?
To basically think in terms of, hey, what are the needs of that community? Because at least you don't have to convince people. There is already a self-selection process. You don't have to convince people. The people who are there are already convinced of this, or that, at least to a certain extent.
Or they're curious and they want to learn about it, or they want to hear from people. So they're selecting to be open to those ideas.
And so how does it work right now? Like, you can basically, like, what's your game plan here to make that app, like, to make sure that people who read all of those books join those communities?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a number of different utilities that we built, over the years, in fact, to help those ideas get kind of coalesced so that they can be sort of discussed. So you think about like this book, What If? There's probably thousands of people in the world, and some of them could be your future best friend or your thought partners on this thing. Yep. If only you could know who else cares about this book. And so, I'd say like the very first thing we did, we actually built a mobile app. So you could take a photo of the page of a physical book, and you could just, use your finger, and we OCR the text, and then we grab that text and push that in, and you create a highlight. And a highlight is like an atomic unit of information. So it's that quote, and it's the annotation, if you choose to write one, and it's tied to that particular piece of media. And so people can see that unit and they can reply to it. They can upvote if they say this is good and relevant to this piece of media. They can downvote it being like, this is irrelevant, I don't like it, I disagree. I think disagree is maybe not the right use for a downvote. It's more like, this is not relevant. So we haven't really articulated that closely. But the idea is, if you can help people generate these atomic units of information, you actually help people connect around those because they're tied to those media objects. So anybody who cares about this media object, it's like, have you ever read on Kindle? If you read something on Kindle, you can notice sometimes these dotted line underlines. You tap it, it says 2,386 people highlighted this passage. Then you click on it, and you're like, well, who are these people? These might be my lifelong friends, but I can't meet them, right? So I think what we need to do is figure out how to get those people connected. Now, there's lots of different ways we've built the iOS app with a photo capture, and like that works for some people, and people love that. Organizes people into these communities. We've done kind of web curation. But I think
we've got the authors would love that, right? The authors would love to be able to connect to the people who read their book.
Exactly. Yep. And so that's what we started doing back, I want to say in well, when is this? Probably in June or May or something. Earlier this year, we started bringing authors on. And so we host what's called Highlighter Live. And we invite an author, and then we invite all of the community or readers who might be interested in that, come together, and we do a Zoom. And just like you and I are broadcasting out to YouTube, we also broadcast those ones out to YouTube. So we have these videos that we make together with the authors and with the community, and we create kind of a video catalog of interesting kind of author discussions. That works great. Amazingly well to get everybody together. So do you know Eugene Wei?
No.
He's a blogger. He writes a lot about kind of tech, kind of San Francisco tech guys. He is kind of probably one of the kind of probably the best, most articulate thinkers on kind of TikTok from a kind of a product kind of strategy perspective. And so he's written up a couple pieces on that. So we're doing a show with him actually starting in 3 hours, 20 minutes. So
great.
If you're interested to come to Highlighter Live, you'll be asleep, I guess.
I'll be sleeping in
right.
Brussels, But great. I'm a big believer in those communities, right? I think like the next wave for technology is decentralization, communities, local communities in the realm of bits or the realm of atoms. And so like actually a book is a fantastic excuse, a social object around which community can form. And so making sure that you can connect them I mean, there was a great, if you read another great book that I like, Margaret Whitley, The
I haven't
Science
read.
of, geez, I have the book somewhere else. Okay, I'll send you the link. But basically thinking about like, the quantum physics and how it applies to management and to actual organizations and so on. And basically it's all about the idea of bring the community together and facilitate the connections between that community, and then good things will happen. Right, so that's kind of the first
totally.
principle. Connect the people with the shared interest together, facilitate the fact that make sure that there is as many possible cross connections between those people.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And
Your
now,
job is done.
And now we talk about that book, right? Because everything's very book focused. But let's take, for example, the Cicero Institute, right? I just sent you. What if you could go on there and highlight the parts of that blog post that you find interesting, and other people who care about the Cicero Institute could also gather there? Like, you would just change the way people gather, right? You could actually help people make new connections and find new thought partners on that. So I think book is this social object with thousands of ideas trapped inside. And I think we can like make those connections, but it's like, it's just one of many of these types of social objects that today miss these like hubs or gathering points where communities can.
But that's
form.
where I'll put my hat of startupper. That's where like I also like such a big believer of starting to learn to swim in a swimming pool and not trying to get into the ocean too quickly. Because otherwise you start boiling, like, and then you start then the edge cases. I think books is already like such a strong first place to start that is already like so big that there's actually so much room to grow before. But that's cool. And so now, like, is it like, is there some numbers to share? Like, how many people are using it? How many people are? How's it going on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, we've spent a lot of time experimenting with these different utilities and tools. So most of our work has been figuring out the right ways to like kind of build the tools and build the hubs and instigate connections and kind of instigate moments. And so, you know, we spent a lot of time with that. I'd say the recent, you know, your idea of bringing an author together is a great one. That one has really worked for instigating these communities. So we've been doing more of that, and we'll continue to do that. Like I said, you know, we've got one starting tonight even. And you know, I think, you know, I think there's still enough to kind of operate and polish. You know, so I would say the core idea, I think, works, but I think the core style of like getting new ones instigated and helping people sort of figure out what else is interesting and what else is next, I don't think we've really solved that. So, you know, we'll have a session, a highlighter live session like tonight. We'll probably have, I don't know, 40 or 50 people will show up, and we'll have lots of good discussion that will instigate. But you know, I bet there's more people in the world than those 40 or 50 who both like care about Eugene and care about his writing.
Yeah, but you know, I think like it's not about like, and the reason why I was asking that question, maybe it was it's a trap that we all fall into with our Silicon Valley mind. It's about like all the time trying to get big numbers. But actually, I think the most important number is not the absolute number, but it's like the number of people who really find it valuable. And to me, the best way to measure that is people who come back. Right? How much? Because you can all the time fake people to get in.
Happiness, right? It's back to your happiness idea.
Exactly. Happy. Exactly. Right. So what? How many people come back because you really are bringing them something, a real utility, and they find meaningful connection through what you are building. So 50 people makes. I'm actually, you know, I'm thinking about like now that all the conferences business is dead with COVID. Pretty much, right? People are gonna look for new type of conferences, and basically, conferences were also fundamentally in the real world like just excuses to bring people together, create new connections, out of which new projects will emerge, and that's why people keep on going back to conferences, right? So here's the same thing. If you get to meet like 50 people, that's probably more than enough. If now the question becomes, how do you make sure that someone can suggest an idea of a action, like, hey, let's do a wiki for reinventing organizations so that we can collect.
Yep.
Great idea. I mean, great. That's good, because actually I was looking for examples that you all have, that you can all share, right? And so your platform is actually the best place to get those things started. So I want to me, like when I see conferences, like, wow, the KPI for a conference should be, hey, how many people started new project after it?
Yes.
And can the conference be actually an incubator in many ways?
Yeah.
Can
the conference is like the instigator to incubate the connections and the ideas and the progress.
And can the book, and you, in many ways, like you're organizing a conference, right? Like where the book is the panelist, right? As people talking about the books, then how can you make sure that something out of that come out, that the community is gonna start? And I learned, like through various citizen initiatives, that at the end of the day, like the best way to connect people is through common projects. It's projects that unite people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I'm excited about that. I'm glad to hear your enthusiasm. That's why we continue to be enthusiastic. I think you're right. Is the focus is not on like a growth number right now. The focus is really on like getting these connections so that it's high quality and people are having a great experience and they come away happy and they come away with new connections and new ideas, and we instigate new ideas. And then over time, I think we can instigate many more ideas and more people instigate their own ideas. So I'm not worried about how do we do that part of it. That part, in a sense, score takes care of itself, right? We need to make sure that we are connecting good people who are getting value, who are instigating the ideas when people come together around these topics. The process there that's where we're focused,
And we have done the proof of work of reading the book, which helps getting rid of the trolls, which is a big problem on the internet. That's great. Thank you. That was really great to
cool.
to get an update on all of that. Yeah. So I'm definitely gonna follow up and see if I can bring some European books as well on that.
Yes,
on that
please
platform,
do.
if you're up for it.
Absolutely, we'd love to. Yeah.
All right.
Great. All right. Well, I guess we've been a little over time already, so maybe we wrap. But thanks thanks again for joining. And well, I'll trade with you some. We should trade some emails, and we have, I think, all these things. We have a bunch of links that we discussed, so I'll pop them all in the show notes. So let's do that. Okay.
That's fantastic.
Good to see you, Xavier. Okay.
Bye bye.